The Warhammer 40,000 universe has four gods that were literally built from human emotion. Every act of rage, every whisper of despair, every obsessive thought across thousands of years pooled together in a dimension of pure psychic energy until something woke up. Today, I'm breaking down every single Chaos God, what created them, what they want, and why they're almost impossible to stop, starting with the place they call home, the Warp. Before any of the Chaos Gods make sense, you need to understand the thing that birthed them. The Warp, also called the Immaterium, the Empyrean, the Sea of Souls, is a parallel dimension of pure psychic energy that exists beneath and within our reality at the same time. Every thought, every emotion, every flicker of fear or ambition from every sentient creature alive bleeds directly into this place, and the Warp remembers all of it. Here's the thing, this is not empty space. This is a sanity-destroying hellscape where the laws of physics don't apply. Causality breaks down completely, and malevolent entities actively hunt anything stupid enough to enter. Time doesn't work. Distance doesn't work. The only thing that functions with any consistency is suffering. The Warp has three distinct layers, and each one is worse than the last. The surface level, the stratum aetheris, is where most travelers pass through. Dangerous, but survivable with protection. Go deeper into the stratum profundus, and you're in the territory of powerful entities. Things with intelligence and hunger that defy mortal comprehension. But the deepest layer, the stratum obscurus, is where the chaos gods themselves reside. This level is described as utterly beyond anything a human mind can process. Reality itself stops pretending to exist down there. But here's where it gets really important. Every act of war happening anywhere in the galaxy feeds directly into the Warp. Every plague, every scheming political betrayal, every moment of obsessive excess, all of it pools together and makes the things living inside stronger. The critical detail that most people miss is this. The gods did not create mortal emotion. Mortal emotion created the gods. Billions of creatures feeling rage for thousands of years didn't just echo into the void. It condensed, it grew, it became aware. That's how you get Khorne, the blood god, Nurgle, the lord of decay, Tzeentch, the architect of fate, Slaanesh, the dark prince, and if you believe certain sources, a fifth god named Malice, whose very existence is controversial. Each one was born from a specific flavor of mortal suffering, and each one is hungry for more. Speaking of hungry, let's start with the angriest thing in existence, Khorne. Khorne is the oldest chaos god. He's also currently the most powerful, and his list of titles reads like a death metal album cover. The Blood God, the Lord of Skulls, the Taker of Skulls, and his true name in the demonic dark tongue, Karnith, which translates directly to Lord of Rage. Subtle, right? He achieved full consciousness in the Warp during the second millennium on Terra, roughly around the European Middle Ages. His birth wasn't quiet. It was marked by an era of wars so ferocious they dwarfed anything humanity had seen before. Though some theorists argue he's far older than that he started coalescing the very first moment one proto-human bashed another's skull in with a rock out of pure rage, meaning Khorne might be as old as murder itself. But here's what makes Khorne almost refreshing compared to the other Chaos Gods. His doctrine is the simplest thing in the entire Warhammer universe. Spill blood, collect skulls. That's it. No rituals, no theology, no conditions, no fine print. The phrase that defines everything about him is this: Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows, only that it flows. That means killing your own allies isn't a failure. It's devotion. Every single death fuels him regardless of who's doing the dying. Now, his domain in the Warp is called the Brass Citadel, and it's exactly as horrifying as it sounds. At its center sits the Skull Throne, a mountain of bone so impossibly vast it dwarfs any mountain in the mortal realm. Every skull belongs to a champion or warrior who fell in battle. Rivers of blood flow through the entire domain, carving through landscapes of blackened iron and scorched bone. Seas of blood stretch across the realm, vast beyond mortal comprehension. Creatures swim in those seas that can't even be properly described as leviathans. But here's where it gets really interesting. Khorne explicitly forbids sorcery. He despises magic. He views Tzeentch's reliance on spells and manipulation as the ultimate cowardice. And yet his own forces benefit from warp-forged weapons. His demons are themselves creatures of the Warp, entities that exist because of psychic energy. His bloodthirsters manifest through processes that are, by every practical definition, supernatural. The reality is that Khorne benefits from all killing regardless of method. He just doesn't acknowledge the contradiction. It's the oldest scam in the universe. Preach purity, profit from everything, and then there are the rivalries. Khorne reserves his most visceral, burning hatred for Slaanesh, who he views as honorless, frivolous, and the single most loathsome being in all of existence. He maintains a bitter rivalry with Tzeentch over the sorcery question, but with Nurgle, things get complicated. The two occasionally find themselves aligned against more pressing threats, making Nurgle the closest thing Khorne has to a tolerable sibling. But if Khorne is rage and violence distilled into a god, Nurgle is something far stranger, because Nurgle genuinely loves you. And that might be the most terrifying sentence in all of Warhammer. Nurgle is the only chaos god that loves you. And that's exactly why he's the most dangerous one. The Plague Lord, Grandfather Nurgle. The Fly Lord, the Urfather. He goes by a lot of names, and every single one of them sounds weirdly comforting for a god whose entire existence revolves around death, decay, disease, and despair. Nurgle embodies entropy itself, the fundamental truth that everything in the universe is falling apart. Your body, your city, your civilization, every star in the sky, all of it is rotting right now, whether you accept it or not. And that's his entire pitch. Accept it. Nurgle emerged in the warp around a similar period to Khorne, feeding off humanity's oldest and most primal fear, death. But where Khorne screams at you, Nurgle opens his arms. He is described as joyful, warm, and genuinely affectionate toward his worshippers. He doesn't conquer through terror. He conquers through comfort. His followers don't feel enslaved. They feel welcome. They feel like they finally belong somewhere. And that psychological trick is infinitely more terrifying than any axe to the skull, because you can resist a threat. Resisting someone who makes you feel loved, that's a different kind of war entirely. His doctrine is simple. All things decay. Running from that truth only prolongs your suffering. Every cure you develop breeds a newer, more powerful disease. Every defense you build teaches Nurgle a new way around it. Resistance isn't defeat for Nurgle. It's data. And time has no meaning in the realm of chaos, so he has all of it. He will wait forever, and forever always comes. Now, his domain. The Garden of Nurgle manifests as this grotesque pastoral paradise, a twisted countryside of blooming plague flowers and stagnant rivers. But at its center sits a crumbling fortress mansion where Nurgle himself toils endlessly before a cauldron so vast it could contain all the oceans of all worlds. With every stir of his maggot-ridden ladle, a dozen fresh diseases scatter across the stars. He reaches down, scoops the mixture into his own mouth, tasting it, refining it, inching closer every day to brewing the perfect plague, a spiritual disease that will spread across the entire universe. Upstairs, he keeps an attic full of cataloged plague samples, jars containing the viscera of victims from across time and space, souls trapped inside, slowly fading away. It's a library of suffering, and he's the proudest librarian you've ever seen. His followers become bloated, rotting, nearly unkillable nightmares, surrounded by clouds of flies, trailed by Nurglings, their bodies falling apart, yet somehow still fighting. Mortal blows rarely slow them down. The gift is endurance and belonging. The cost is everything that ever made them human. Here's where it gets interesting, though. Some theorists in the community argue that Nurgle is actually more powerful than Khorne. The logic is compelling. Every killing feeds decay. Every corpse on every battlefield eventually rots. The despair saturating the 41st millennium feeds Nurgle constantly. And even Khorne's victims empower the Plague Lord in their final moments of dread before death takes them. Most canonical sources still give Khorne the edge, but honestly, the argument is genuinely unsettled. Nurgle might be winning the long game, and he's the one god patient enough to play it. But if Nurgle represents the end of all things, the next god represents something arguably worse. The one who makes sure nothing ever stays the same long enough for you to understand it. Tzeentch. If Khorne is the god you understand immediately, and Nurgle is the god you understand eventually, Tzeentch is the god you never understand. And that's exactly how he wants it. The architect of fate, the changer of the ways, the great conspirator. His sacred number is 9, and his titles alone tell you everything and nothing at the same time. Like Khorne and Nurgle, Tzeentch achieved full consciousness during the early second millennium, his birth coinciding with the rise of medieval political intrigue, the age when humanity stopped simply fighting over land and started scheming for power. Backstabbing, double-dealing, playing the long game, that hunger to outmaneuver, to know more than the person across the table, that's what gave Tzeentch life. He embodies humanity's drive for knowledge, ambition, and the desire to change and evolve. Sounds almost noble, right? Here's the thing, his true power flows from sorcery, and since all sorcery flows from the warp, Tzeentch has effectively become the master of all psychic energy. Every spell cast, every prophecy prophecy whispered. Every forbidden text open at midnight beats him. He doesn't just use magic, he is magic. But his defining characteristic is what makes him genuinely terrifying. Tzeentch plots simply to plot. His schemes are of such impossible complexity that even he sometimes becomes lost within them. He does not work toward any comprehensible goal. The scheme in itself is the point. He is simultaneously aware of the plans of every mortal in the galaxy, favoring the cunning over the strong, occasionally sabotaging his own designs just to see what happens next. Nobody, not even the other gods, can predict what he'll do, and then there's his domain. If Khorne's realm is violent and Nurgle's is disgusting, Tzeentch's realm is just wrong. The crystal labyrinth shifts based on the perception of whoever is looking at it. No fixed geography, no consistent rules. The impossible fortress at its center is simultaneously perfectly symmetrical and horribly unbalanced. Spires reflect themselves into existence and collapse inward moments later. Step inside and it gets worse. Every room follows different laws. Gravity changes, time changes, mass disappears. Even a stray thought from Tzeentch can pull apart anyone locked in physical form. Those who go mad inside, and almost everyone does, are sometimes reborn as sorcerer's familiars and gifted to his champions. Your mind breaks and you become a tool. Deep within the fortress lies the well of eternity. Only one being has ever survived looking into it. Whatever insights the well granted, no source has ever recorded what they were. An answer exists that only one entity in the entire universe knows, and nobody can even describe the question. His primary rivalry is with Nurgle, and it makes perfect sense. They are direct philosophical opposites. Nurgle feeds on despair and stagnation. Tzeentch feeds on hope, ambition, and the desire for change. Where Nurgle is entropy, Tzeentch is possibility. His conflict with Khorne runs differently. Khorne doesn't hate what Tzeentch represents. He hates how Tzeentch operates. Winning through manipulation rather than strength is an insult to everything the blood god stands for. But here's what separates Tzeentch from every other god in the pantheon. You can resist Khorne by refusing to fight. You can resist Nurgle by refusing to despair. You can resist Slaanesh by refusing excess. But how do you resist the desire to know? How do you resist hope? Tzeentch feeds on the one thing every living creature needs to survive, and he knows it. Of course, scheming against each other is one thing, but when all four gods turn their attention toward the same battlefield at the same time, that's when the galaxy truly shakes. The Great Game. Everything you've heard so far, Khorne's endless slaughter, Nurgle's plagues, Tzeentch's infinite schemes, none of it matters compared to what happens when these gods turn on each other. Because the Chaos Gods aren't just threats to the mortal universe, they're threats to each other. And the war between them is the single most dangerous ongoing event in existence. It's called the Great Game, and it has been raging since before recorded history. The rules are simple. 4 gods, 1 warp, and 0 willingness to share. Each god wants total dominance over the immaterium and, through it, the entire physical universe. And the cycle plays out the same way every single time. One god grows dominant. Maybe Khorne's wars are feeding him faster than the others can keep up. Maybe Tzeentch pulled off a scheme so massive it tipped the scales. Whatever the cause, the dominant god starts leeching energy from its rivals, growing stronger while they weaken. So the other 3 do the only logical thing. They temporarily ally against the leader and cut it back down. Then another rises. Then the alliance shifts. Then it happens again. This has repeated endlessly for millennia, with 0 gods ever achieving permanent supremacy, and when these gods actually fight. The consequences don't stay in the warp. Warp storms of unprecedented scale tear across the galaxy in real space. Entire sectors lose contact with the Imperium. Demonic legions pour from one god's territory into another's in numbers that would make any mortal army look like a scouting party. Pacts form mid-battle between gods who were trying to destroy each other seconds earlier, then shatter the moment a tactical advantage appears. Loyalty means nothing. Strategy means everything, and betrayal is the only constant. But here's where it gets truly terrifying. Occasionally something emerges in the material universe so significant, so threatening to the shared interests of all 4 gods that they actually stop fighting each other completely. In those moments, they act as chaos undivided and the galaxy trembles. The clearest example in history, the Emperor of Mankind. The Chaos Gods looked at what the Emperor was building, a secular human empire that would starve them of worship, and they collectively decided he had to be destroyed. They conspired to scatter his Primarchs from the laboratory on Terra where they were created, flinging them across the galaxy. They spent centuries corrupting half of those Primarchs, and they culminated their efforts in the Horus Heresy, the civil war that nearly annihilated the Imperium and left the Emperor a broken shell entombed on the Golden Throne. 4 gods who can't agree on anything agreed on that. Now here's the part that should keep you up at night. The great game continuing is horrifying. Warp storms, demonic invasions, civilizations collapsing as collateral damage from a war they don't even know is happening. But one god actually winning? That might be worse. If any single chaos god achieved complete dominance over the others, the consequences wouldn't just threaten the Imperium. They would threaten the fabric of reality itself. The balance between the 4 powers, as nightmarish as it is, may be the only thing keeping existence intact. So the galaxy is trapped. The war never ends, the suffering never stops. And the alternative to this eternal stalemate is something even more catastrophic. That's the great game. And every mortal caught in the crossfire is nothing more than a rounding error. But if the great game sounds like the worst thing the Chaos Gods have ever produced, wait until you hear about the youngest god, the one whose birth killed an entire civilization overnight, Slaanesh. Every Chaos God we've talked about so far has ancient, murky origins stretching back thousands of years, fed by the emotions of countless sentient species across the galaxy. Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, all of them coalesced over millennia from the psychic residue of war, despair, and ambition. Slaanesh is different, completely different. Slaanesh is the youngest Chaos God by a staggering margin, born in the early 30th millennium, and was created entirely by a single species called the Aeldari. Here's the thing, the Aeldari weren't some minor alien race. They had dominated the galaxy for millions of years. Their technology was so advanced and their psychic mastery so complete that they had eliminated every conceivable need. Labor, survival, conflict, restraint, all of it was gone. They had literally nothing left to do except feel things. But over generations, the pursuit of sensation became the pursuit of excess, and the pursuit of excess became something far darker. Pleasure cults consumed their entire civilization. An empire that had stood for millions of years dissolved into pure, unrestrained depravity. And then came the night that ended everything. The collective debauchery of an entire civilization reached a crescendo so extreme that it tore a hole in reality itself. Slaanesh's birth scream erupted as a tsunami of psychic power that killed billions of Aeldari in a single instant. The barrier between the material universe and the warp shattered, creating a permanent wound in reality that humanity would later name the Eye of Terror. The most powerful civilization the galaxy had ever known was annihilated in one night, not by war, not by invasion, by their own pleasure. But Slaanesh wasn't done. The newborn god's first act was to hunt down and devour the Aeldari's own gods. Ancient deities that had existed for millions of years consumed one after another. Isha, the goddess of life, was claimed by Slaanesh, but then stolen away by Nurgle, who keeps her trapped in his plague garden to this day. Tegorach, the laughing god, survived by fleeing into the webway. And Cain, the god of war, fought Slaanesh to a stalemate, and was shattered into fragments scattered across the galaxy. A newborn god ate nearly an entire pantheon on its first day of existence. Now, Slaanesh's realm in the warp is called the Palace of Pleasure, and it operates on a rule no other Chaos God's domain follows. It's open. Any being in existence can visit. That sounds inviting, and that's exactly the point. 6 concentric rings of escalating temptation surround the palace, each one using desire as a weapon more lethal than any firearm. The first ring confronts visitors with riches beyond imagination. Each ring after that escalates further. Those who succumb are consumed by the land itself or turned into statues that decorate the scenery for the next visitors. And the palace at the center? Nobody has ever entered it unless they already belong to Slaanesh. Every single being who has looked upon the Dark Prince's true form has surrendered completely. Mind, body, and soul. The corruption mechanic is pure addiction. Followers are granted enhanced sensation, and then they immediately crave more. Each gift requires greater depravity to achieve the same effect. It's a trap with no floor. Slaanesh is neither male nor female, combining and perfecting both beyond mortal comprehension. The Aeldari calls Slaanesh she who thirsts, and here's the part that makes this god truly horrifying. Every single Aeldari who dies even today, tens of thousands of years years after the fall, has their soul instantly consumed by Slaanesh. Not just the ones who worship the Dark Prince, all of them. Every Eldari alive carries a death sentence that leads directly into the stomach of the god their ancestors created. But perhaps the most staggering detail about Slaanesh's birth is what it accidentally caused. The psychic explosion that destroyed the Eldari Empire also cleared the warp storms that had been isolating humanity for millennia. Slaanesh's birth ended those storms overnight, and that allowed the Emperor of Mankind to launch the Great Crusade and forge the Imperium of Man. One species dies screaming, and another gets to build among the ashes. That's not poetic justice. That's the warp. But if you think the four main gods and their youngest sibling cover the full picture, there's one more entity lurking in the shadows that most people have never even heard of. Malice. Every god we've talked about so far wants to win the great game. Khorne wants blood. Nurgle wants decay. Tzeentch wants change. Slaanesh wants sensation. They compete, they scheme, they form temporary alliances, and they betray each other. That's the cycle. That's how the warp works. Malice doesn't want to win the great game. He wants to destroy it. The fifth chaos. God, also called the renegade god, the outcast, the lost, the hierarch of anarchy and terror, exists for one purpose: to turn chaos against itself. He is an active enemy of Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh. He is also an active enemy of the Imperium. He fights everyone. His doctrine is pure anarchy, and his followers don't serve chaos. They weaponize it. But here's where it gets complicated, because Malice's most fascinating battle wasn't fought in the warp. It was fought in a courtroom. The character was originally named Malal, created by freelance writers John Wagner and Alan Grant during their work for Games Workshop. The problem? Wagner and Grant retained copyright over the original character. When the dispute escalated in the late 1980s, Games Workshop did something remarkable. They didn't retcon Malal through story. They didn't kill him off in a campaign. They just stopped using the name. Beginning in 3rd edition, Malal vanished from official publications, quietly replaced by the slightly altered name Malice. Games Workshop essentially tried to erase a chaos god through legal maneuvering rather than lore, and it almost worked. Almost. Here's the critical detail that everyone arguing Malice isn't canon needs to hear. He appears by name in Labyrinth, a story published in the Heroes of the Space Marines anthology in 2009. That's an official Games Workshop and Black Library publication. That anthology was republished in hardcover in 2017 and again in 2025. No disclaimer, no footnote saying the content is no longer canon. Nothing. Exclusion from recent codexes is not the same as retconning. If it were, half the characters in Warhammer would stop being canon every time a new edition dropped. Now let's talk about what makes Malice terrifying. His followers, the Sons of Malice, wear black and white armor and hold the number 11 as sacred. Every 100 years, the Sons gather aboard a Space Hulk called the Labyrinth to perform a ritual that would make even Khorne's berserkers uncomfortable. They eat alive dozens of Xenos and human captives in Malice's honor. Then they hold the sacred challenge of the Labyrinth, a brutal trial designed to select exactly 11 warriors, the Doom Ones, who are then sacrificed to summon Malice directly into the material universe. Read that again, summoned into real space. This is the single most important detail in this entire video. Summoning any of the other 4 Chaos Gods into the material universe is considered a complete impossibility. The lore is clear on this. It would require an entire plan of devoted worshippers offering their souls collectively, and even then, no confirmed case exists. The 4 most powerful beings in the warp cannot physically walk in real space. Period. Malice can. 11 mortal warriors sacrifice themselves, and the renegade god manifests in the material universe. He walks where Khorne cannot. He stands where Tzeentch cannot scheme his way into being. That single ability recontextualizes everything we know about the power hierarchy of chaos. The 4 gods have trillions of followers across the galaxy and cannot achieve what Malice does with their 11. The Sons of Malice themselves were declared excommunicate traitorous by the Imperium after an Ordo Hereticus Inquisitor found their post-battle rituals during the Selix 225 campaign a little too objectionable for comfort. They retreated into the Eye of Terror, where they now wage war against literally everyone. Imperial forces, Chaos warbands, Xenos, it doesn't matter. They are enemies of both sides of the war that defines the 41st millennium. They belong to no one. And one final note, recent lore has begun referencing not 4, not 5, but potentially up to 8 Chaos Gods. Concepts like ravenous dissolution and the primordial annihilator have started appearing in newer sources. Whether these represent independent deities, aspects of existence, existing gods or something else entirely remains completely unresolved. The pantheon that everyone assumed was settled may still be growing. And if that's true, then everything we think we know about the warp, the great game, and the nature of chaos itself might only be the beginning. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.